Admonition the 28th. Check your water supply regularly. Our water first ran out in our third week at Dunnans. It was a lovely afternoon in April, as I remember it, with myself and Mike working on the insulation for the red shed. The great rolls of silver duvet sat in a tidy pile at the front steps as we stapled and battened our way around walls and ceiling. We were not sure exactly whether the insulation would do the job we were told it would, but we were thankful we weren't using the conventional yellow, skin-irritating, eye-watering, lung-busting rolls of fiberglass. This was, of course, before they brought in the hypoallergenic vegan kind. Outside, in the sunshine, Sadie was hosing down recovered Victorian-era ceramic ware. A shout brought us out to see her standing, gesturing with a hose, manifestly not gushing. It's run out. As indicated earlier, Mike's inspection the previous autumn had revealed what one could consider the traditional private water supply setup. At the very top is a black plastic collection tank, which had been set into the stream bed of the burn which runs along our march with Garvey Farm. Water enters the tank via holes punched into the tank's lid and then flows out through a copper sieve into the downward pipe, for which bright blue alkathin had been used. This in turn had been insulated with lengths of grey soil pipe and secured at the joints by gaffer tape. Each length was then pinioned by metal stakes and driven into the bankside and attached using black plastic cable ties. The bright blue internal pipe indicated, Mike said, to a more recent installation, as traditionally all water pipe of the sort of gauge would have been black. Around 50 metres and maybe 5 vertical metres lower, a larger settling tank had been installed. The alkathin was let into the tank at rim height, and water then filled the tank. At the downhill side, another similarly insulated alkathin pipe took the settled water on towards the two half-buried storage tanks which were set a couple of metres inside the march fence and the gate of the infamous sign. The water is then piped underground across the paddock downhill to the castle and house. Importantly, the storage tanks sit over 15 metres above roof level of the castle, providing ample height to give a reasonable water pressure at point of use, even in the upper reaches of the building. The access hatches for these tanks were both secured by the supplied heavy-duty hex bolts and then also post-fitted and slightly improvised metal strapping, which was attached using a heavy-duty padlock. The keys for the padlock came with the paperwork. We all thought that was a little unusual until we remembered the previously mentioned warning signs. Mike and I walked up to the storage tanks. The problem was immediately obvious. The 32mm alkathin leading into the storage tanks had been cut. A round 5mm thick circle of bright blue seemed to exclaim a dismayed "Oh" at us through the rashes as we approached. We circled the storage tanks and could see that someone had cut the lengths in the immediate vicinity several times. While we examined the damage, we also looked for evidence of recent footprints, and there were none. We checked the fastenings on the tanks. They at least looked secure. The combination of hex bolts and heavy-duty metal strapping and padlocks had withstood tampering, it seemed. I'm not sure either of us said much. Mike would have lit his pipe, the better to get his breath back after the climb. At that stage, the stage his match flared and ignited the sweet amber leaf, and the smoke drifted across to me in all its sulphurous, nicotinoid glory, I'd have rolled myself one. A pantomime of pocket-tapping and pipe-holding would have then ensued, and the Bryant and May would have passed forth and back, given that, as was usual, I'd have left my brass Zippo on the shelf by the front door of this still incomplete red shed. And after my first inhalation, I noted that the rashes had hidden the extent of the issue. Not only had the single pipe leading down been cut twice, but the bifurcation where the supply led to each of the tanks had been sawn through too, twice. In each case. That made 6 separate cuts in a 10-foot square area. "Well, you're lucky, Charlie." "I am." "Ha!" smiled Mike. "This is 32mm. There's some 22 on the rope around the woodland across there. If we use that, it'll fit inside the 32 and we can repair the cuts immediately, temporarily at least." But who the hell? Oh, no idea, none. Bloody reckless. Must have been since we came up at New Year. I checked it, all fine, frozen and not working, but all connected up. This is since then. Mike squatted down and examined one of the cut ends. See here? He gestured with his finger. The marks show a saw, but quite a fine one. Hacksaw, I'd say, or a jigsaw, or more likely, given the reach he'd need to cut the pipe down there, he gestured to the stream bed, one of those clockwork stills with a fine reciprocating blade. Yes, definitely the latter. A hacksaw would have taken more time, and you'd see evidence of pauses, maybe small ledges in the plastic. This is a single cut, straight through. A powered saw with a blade with fine teeth. Jigsaw would do the same, but less handy. So clockwork, still saw. Bastard. Aye, and given there are 6 cuts here, then it's definitely something powered. No one would do this by hand. He glanced at me. Well, unless you were completely psychotic. We gazed in wonder at the cut pipe, contemplating the adjectives completely and psychotic. And I think you'll find they did more damage further up. Why? I asked. Not a trickle coming down the pipe either. Dry as a bone. Not even dew. Hell. There were indeed cuts all the way up. Large grey lengths of soil pipe littered the path of the burn like the spine of a broken animal as the watercourse slipped back and forth through the small tree-lined defile. Each cut had been through both alkathin and grey soil pipe. Well, that decides it. Must have been a still or something similar. Long enough blade for the 6-inch soil pipe as well. Can you see the ragged cut on the underside? Mike indicated with his pipe. That's where it was only cutting at the end of the blade, and the end of it punched small fragments of the soil pipe as it went downwards. So, look for a man with a 6-inch steel saw. Aye, and a petty glint in his eye. The settling tank was more or less intact. Whoever had sabotaged the supply, though, had really lost it with the 4-gallon collecting tank at the top. Set in a natural ledge on the inside of an inset meander, the water was supposed to fall over the upstream lip and fill the tank, and then either be sucked into the intake halfway up the downstream side, or fall uncaptured over the downstream lip. The intake should have had the improvised copper pipe filter Mike had discovered the year before to discourage gravel and detritus as well, because during periods of heavy rainfall the amount of debris the burn carries is prodigious. The lid had been torn off, snapped in two and thrown downstream, while the tank itself had been thoroughly stamped on. The sides were compressed, and there were cracks and fissures all around the lip. We found the perforated copper pipe filter 20 yards upstream at a point a field drain entered the burn. Quite a throw in the confined space of the shallow ravine. Water was trickling into the collection tank, but the damage had diverted the stream and filled the tank with gravel and stones. Another pipe and another cigarette later, we'd considered the issue from all sides and decided repair for now was the best remedy for the entire system, even the header tank. As Mike opined, if we spent a few £100 on the project, we had no guarantee this Burke, or set of Burkes, whoever they were, would not return to do the same thing. We agreed, though, that we would invest in a new header tank. That at least was unrecoverable. I'd say, Charlie, that the reason he or they took their time here is that it was unlikely they'd ever be seen. The rest of it is a matter of moments in each place. You know, walk, pause for 5 seconds, zip, zip, and walk on. This, at the top, is where they can afford to spend the time. See how that oak curves over the meander, and on both up and downstream sides there's birches and alders almost falling into the cut of the burn. Really sheltered. No visibility. Can't see the top of the castle. Can't see over into McGuffey's fields either. Now you're here, of course. Mike paused and smiled. Well, they won't know, and they'll not be discovered. So if they do it again, they won't take time to smash this up. Worth it then. Aye, £20 for materials, yes. Before we began, though, I took photos. Still have them, on Dropbox, like everything else. Even then, I knew the recording of evidence was important. It is easy to make unfounded accusations, no matter how credible you seem, nor how believable the accusation. It is far more difficult to prove these things, as both we and our opponents were to discover. Ultimately, a thorough, collected approach will win the day, or at least that is what I told myself at the time, after the red mist had cleared and I was able to view the matter rationally. With regard to the destruction of our water supply, Sadie took the more direct line as soon as we had reported back. She called the police, as she said this was A, criminal damage, and B, potentially GBH. I raised my eyebrows at this, but one word convinced me she had a point: Campylobacter. In the event, we even had a visit from the Socko boys. I was impressed. Sadie was impatient. Their cautious approach did not even indicate a type of sore. This rude introduction to the vulnerability of our water supply was instructive, not only as a further rehearsal of issues around security for the site as a whole, but as to how any problems with any of the several elements of the water apparatus would prevent the storage tanks filling, and that we would only know there was a problem some several days after the fact. From time to time, therefore, we have experienced days and sometimes weeks without water. We have hedged, of course, with supplies of mineral water, then with supplies of our own water stored in the multitudinous number of 5-litre bottles we'd saved.